They didn't see me behind the row of vending machines when they said it. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. Either way, their words hit me with the force of a moving car. We'll list her house this weekend. By the time she's back, the papers will already be signed. I froze. My suitcase slid from my hand and landed hard on the floor of the arrival terminal. Neither of them flinched. My son Daniel leaned closer to his wife, speaking low and fast, like a man closing a dirty deal. "You've got the listing form already, right? She won't even check the mailbox. Just act like it's junk." "Daniel," she giggled, her voice sharp as vinegar, "it's not junk if it makes our lives easier. You know your mother's not using that place anymore. One spare bedroom and a garden full of weeds. What's she going to do with that?" I hadn't even taken my coat off. Wilmington Airport was humid, late summer heat pushing through every vent. I had just flown back from Tucson after visiting my granddaughter for 2 weeks, a trip they themselves insisted I take, said it would be good for me, that I needed a break. Now I understood. They'd needed me gone. I didn't move, just stood behind that machine like a ghost, watching my son and the woman he married plot the quiet erasure of my life. "She's got power of attorney," Daniel added. "We just need to slide the paperwork under her nose when she's in one of her dazes. Sign here, Ma, like always." She won't even blink. "She still owns too much," she muttered. "I want that house sold before she realizes she can still say no." They started walking toward the parking garage. I didn't follow. I didn't call out. I didn't say a word. Instead, I picked up my suitcase, walked past them, unnoticed, and stepped out into the hot wind like a woman waking from anesthesia. My bones felt hollow, my legs numb, but my mind, oh, my mind was clearer than it had been in years. When I got into the cab and told the driver my address, my voice was steady. I didn't cry. I didn't ask questions. I just stared out the window, watching Wilmington pass by, unchanged. Same cracked sidewalks, same blinking neon diner signs. The same city where I buried my husband and raised a child who now wanted to erase me from my own porch. Inside the house, everything was untouched. The porch light still blinked. The calico cat from next door still lounged on my railing like it paid rent. The keys were still in their little bowl. It was all mine, for now. I dropped my bag by the door and walked straight to the kitchen, pulled the tin from the top cupboard, and opened the envelope I had tucked away years ago. Birth certificate, marriage license, property deed, the original trust documents, all still there, all still in my name. But that wouldn't last if Daniel and Cynthia had their way. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink, hands trembling, mind racing. They were right about one thing. I had let myself drift these past few years. After Robert died, it was like someone cut the sound off in my life. I just went through the motions. Cook, sweep, watch the news, say thank you when the grandkids remembered to send a card. But this betrayal, it snapped something awake in me. They thought I'd go quietly, sign the papers, disappear into some senior complex in Tucson where I'd bake banana bread for strangers and wait to die. They were wrong, so wrong. I rinsed my glass, set it down with a sharp clink, and walked to the living room. The photos were still on the mantel. Daniel as a boy with cake on his face. Robert grinning in his old fishing vest. Me in a yellow dress, the day we got the keys to this house. I looked at the pictures. Then I looked at the phone. And then I made my first call. Not to Daniel, not to Cynthia, but to someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. My lawyer. Janice? I said when she picked up, her voice as brisk as ever. It's Loretta Winslow. I need to know if someone's tried to move property in my name without my knowledge, and I need it fast. The house felt colder the next morning, though the thermostat still blinked its usual 72. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was knowing that somewhere out there, my only child was planning my disappearance like a business deal. Janice called back at 9:14 a.m. Sharp. She always had a mind like a scalpel, clean and fast. I looked into it, she said without small talk. Your name is still on the deed. No transfer filed yet, but... I waited. There was a document submitted last week for pre-clearance, she continued. An intent to sell from someone claiming to act under your durable power of attorney, signed electronically. My breath caught. Who submitted it? Daniel, with Cynthia listed as a co-signer on the agent forms. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. The chair creaked beneath me like it hadn't in years. It was a scanned signature, Janice said. Not notarized yet. That's the good news. The bad news is, if they do get someone willing to witness or notarize under false pretenses, they can move fast, especially if the listing agent's in on it or doesn't ask questions. My fingers curled around the edge of the table. Can they do that? Just sell it? Not if we act now. Janice's voice dropped lower. I'll file a revocation of power of attorney this morning. We'll also notify the county clerk to flag any property action under your name. But Loretta... I know, I said. They've already started. We ended the call, and I sat there for a long time, the tin of old papers open in front of me, documents spilling like breadcrumbs in the woods. The kitchen smelled faintly of rosemary and dish soap. It had always been a quiet house, even when Robert was alive. We weren't loud people. We were solid. That's what made this harder. I didn't raise a monster. I raised a boy who helped me build birdhouses on Saturdays and cried when his hamster died. What happened between then and now? When did I stop being his mother and start being an obstacle? I opened the file labeled Daniel 2003-2018. It was thick. Student loans, car repairs, the down payment on their first condo, when Cynthia said it was too humiliating to borrow from her parents. I remembered writing that check while Robert was still in the hospital. I didn't hesitate. But this wasn't borrowing. This was theft. I walked through the house slowly, touching corners of memory. The groove in the banister where Daniel used to slide down in socks. The sunken spot on the couch where Robert always sat, remote in hand. The tiny notch in the doorframe where I'd marked Daniel's height every birthday until he turned 16 and said, "I'm too old for that now, Ma." Apparently, he wasn't too old to sell the roof over my head. By noon, Janice texted to confirm the revocation had been filed. "You're protected, for now," she wrote. "But keep your eyes open." I stared at the message. Protected. For now. It wasn't enough. It wasn't just about stopping them. It was about standing up. For the first time in years, I wanted more than to survive. I wanted to be seen, respected, even feared, if that's what it took. I opened the drawer where I kept the old phone book, not because I needed numbers, but because my habits never caught up with modern tech. I flipped until I found the name I was looking for, Eleanor Pike, realtor. We'd gone to high school together, lost touch, then reconnected briefly at Robert's funeral. She had that same sharp bob and too bright lipstick. She also sold houses faster than anyone in Wilmington. I called her. "Eleanor," I said, "it's Loretta Winslow." "Well, I'll be damned," she said, chewing something. Loretta, I haven't heard your voice since, what was it, 2016? I need to sell a house, I said calmly. Fast, quietly. There was a pause. Yours? No. My son's. That silenced her. I'm not joking, I added. I didn't think you were. I gave her the address. Daniel and Cynthia's oversized McMansion in that soulless new development near the country club. All beige stone and fake columns. It's in both their names, I said. But the land? That was mine. I gave it to Daniel 5 years ago when he said they wanted to build a legacy home. He never told me he'd refinance it twice. I'm guessing their equity is thin. Do you have access to their title records? She asked, suddenly businesslike. I will, I said. We ended the call. I sat back, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Edge. Not anger, not fear, strategy. They wanted to erase me while I was in Tucson, wanted to turn my kitchen into someone else's reading nook. Well, two can play that game. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to sell their house before they could even finish printing flyers for mine. The first thing I noticed when I walked through their front door was the smell. Artificial vanilla and some chemical cleaner sharp enough to sting. Cynthia's doing, no doubt. She always liked things sterile, even people, if she could manage it. They weren't home. That much I had confirmed with Eleanor, who still had her own connections in title search and neighborhood gossip. He's working late, she'd said. She's at her Pilates wine fusion class. Whatever that was. The security code hadn't changed. Same 4 digits Daniel's always used since high school, his football number. I punched it in, stepped inside, and shut the door behind me. It was like walking into a magazine spread. Everything matched, everything gleamed. The kind of house that looked lived in by robots or actors. Nothing out of place. No softness. No warmth. Just expensive silence. I walked through their foyer, past the wall of curated family photos, black and white, high-gloss prints, staged and cold. There was not a single image of me. Not one. Cynthia's parents were there, her sister, even a dog I'd never met. I didn't linger. I headed straight for the home office. I'd been there once before, when Daniel proudly showed off his new ergonomic chair and the custom walnut desk Cynthia had to have, because real estate clients judged decor now. Back then, I thought nothing of it. Just smiled, said it was beautiful. Now I opened the drawers. Nothing illegal. Nothing wild. Just papers. Bills. Mortgage statements. Credit card letters. 2 overdue notices, one in bright red. I found the title file at the back of the lowest drawer. Pulled it out carefully. He'd used the land I gave him as collateral for 2 loans. One to finish the construction. Another, more recent one, marked second mortgage, likely to cover their ongoing lifestyle circus. They were drowning, and they thought I was the easiest plank to grab onto. I took photos of every relevant page, scanning each document into the app Eleanor told me to install. I was slow, careful. My eyesight wasn't what it used to be, but my hands were steady. Before I left, I walked upstairs. Just because. Their bedroom was exactly as I imagined. Tasteful, cold, expensive. The bed made with military precision. I paused at Cynthia's side table. On it, a book about wellness, a facial roller, and a crystal lamp that promised alignment. Beside it, a hand cream I recognized. I'd bought it for her last Christmas. She hadn't even opened it. Downstairs again, I stood for a moment in the middle of their silent, cavernous kitchen. I could hear Robert's voice from years ago at our own scuffed table. One day, he'd said, you'll need to remind him where he came from and who paid for his first shoes. At the time, I laughed. Robert always worried too much. But now I wished I'd listened sooner. I relocked the door and left without touching anything else. The wind had picked up. Leaves skittered across their perfect porch. I walked to my car, the old Honda they'd teased me about, and drove home like a woman with purpose. Eleanor called that evening. "I got everything," she said. "You weren't kidding. Their equity's almost non-existent. But the lot? Still valuable. If they default, the bank will take it. Then we won't give the bank the chance." "You're really doing this?" "They started it," I said quietly. She hesitated. "What about backlash?" "Let them come. I've been quiet for too long." There was a pause. "Then let's list." We chose a subtle listing, no public sign. Eleanor would handle the showings as private appointments, the kind meant for investors, fast closings, cash ready. She'd seen houses sold out from under divorcing couples who weren't watching. Daniel and Cynthia would never expect their own game played against them. That night, I made tea the way I always did. 2 bags, no sugar, mug with the chipped rim. I sat in the kitchen with my notebook and started writing. Not to them, to myself. What I've paid for over the years. 2001. Daniel's community college tuition, entire first year. 2005. Cynthia's bridal upgrade wedding. I paid for the florist when her father had a bad quarter. 2009. Down payment for their first condo. 2010, 2014. Weekly childcare help, groceries, babysitting, rides. 2015. Private school tuition for their son when the public school had bad lighting. Page after page, it added up. And not once had I been asked how I was doing. Not once had Daniel sat at my table just to see how I felt. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about memory, about dignity. They thought I was old, soft, forgetful. Let them learn. The next morning, I didn't wake up to birds or the mail truck or even the creak of my knees. I woke up to the hollow clatter of someone knocking at my door. Sharp, fast, impatient. I didn't have to guess. I took my time, brushed my teeth, tied my robe tighter. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there with that nervous smile he used when he was 10 and caught lying about homework. "Mom," he said. "Hey." I looked past him. No Cynthia. That was interesting. He shifted his weight, holding a paper coffee cup like it was an offering. "Brought you a latte, hazelnut, like you like." "I drink tea now," I said, and stepped aside. "You coming in? Or is this a performance for the neighborhood?" He came in. The living room hadn't changed since he was in high school. Same chairs, same floral curtains Cynthia always rolled her eyes at. Same old throw rug Robert once spilled paint on. I saw his eyes scan the place, calculating. He was already seeing the potential listing angles. Open space, great light, ideal for downsizing. I sat. He didn't. "I heard you were back," he said carefully. "Wanted to check in. See how you were feeling after the trip." I let the silence sit between us until it became heavy. "You heard," I said. "From who?" "Cynthia mentioned she saw your suitcase yesterday, in the hallway." "Strange. You didn't see it when you were planning to sell the place?" His face twitched, just for a second. "Mom, I heard you," I said, "at the airport." He didn't deny it, just walked over to the mantel, picked up a picture of himself at age 9, missing his 2 front teeth. "You've misunderstood a lot," he said, voice softer. "It was just a conversation, nothing serious. We were brainstorming." "Interesting word. So was the part where you said you'd file papers while I was gone." He turned, exhaling loudly. "You've been living alone too long, Ma. The place is too big. You're isolated. We thought we'd help. You thought you'd take. That's not fair. No, I said, standing. What's not fair is raising a child who sees you as a line item on a spreadsheet. He blinked. I rarely raised my voice. He wasn't used to hearing steel in it. You signed a power of attorney, he mumbled, defensive. Years ago, when your father was dying. Because I trusted you. You still can. Daniel, I said, and my voice was quieter now, but firmer. If you'd asked me, I might have listened. I might have considered options. But you didn't ask. You plotted. He opened his mouth, closed it. I revoked the POA, I said. It's done. The county has been notified. Any attempt to act on my behalf will be flagged. The silence was thick. I watched him do the mental math. Timeline, consequences, angles of retreat. And that's not all, I added. He turned slowly, cautious. I've listed your house. He blinked. You what? You heard me. You can't do that. I can. I gave you that land. And I've just filed to reclaim it under conditional revocation. You used it to take out multiple loans. The clause allows reversal if it's misused. Eleanor Pike is the agent. He went white, took a step back like I'd struck him. Eleanor, he said, are you, Mom? Are you serious? You should check your email, I said. There's a preliminary listing agreement. You and Cynthia will receive formal notification within the week. He sat down without being asked, put the coffee cup on the table, and stared at it. This is revenge, he muttered. No, I said. This is memory. He looked up. I remembered the sacrifices. The nights I stayed up sewing your school play costume. The money I sent when you said Cynthia needed surgery and I never asked what kind. The time I sold Robert's watch to cover your insurance lapse. He said nothing. And I remembered that not once did you ask if I was okay. He shifted. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. He stood up abruptly. Fine. You made your point. You want to burn it all down. Be my guest. It's not about burning, I said. It's about balance. I'm keeping what's mine. You'll keep what you earn. We'll see how even the scales are then. He walked to the door, furious now. You've changed. I smiled. No. I just stopped being silent. He left without slamming the door. That was the only grace he gave me. I stood at the window and watched his car reverse out of my driveway. Fast, jerky, angry. For a moment, I felt a pang in my chest, not from regret, but from history. The first time I let him drive, he did the same thing. Hit the brake too hard, peeled the tires. Robert laughed. I winced. Now I didn't flinch. Cynthia showed up 3 hours later. No warning, no call, just her sharp-heeled footsteps pounding the porch like she owned it. I didn't open the door right away. Let her knock twice. When I finally pulled it open, she was standing there in her gym clothes, tight black leggings, perfectly sculpted ponytail, nails painted the same angry red as her expression. Well, she said, not bothering with a greeting. I suppose congratulations are in order. I didn't answer, just stepped aside and let her in. She walked in like a woman inspecting damage after a storm, scanning the room for signs of destruction or rebellion. Her eyes lingered on the tin box of documents still sitting open on the coffee table. She smiled, tight and thin. So, she said, dropping her designer bag onto the couch. We're doing this now? Turning into the kind of family that airs grievances through lawyers? I sat. If you'd asked first, there wouldn't be lawyers. She laughed, cold and bright. Asked? Loretta, we've been begging you for years to downsize, to move somewhere safer. You always had an excuse. You've had falls. You isolate. You don't drive much. We were thinking of your future. I tilted my head slightly. Is that why you submitted forged paperwork in my name? Out of concern? Her expression didn't change, just the slightest twitch of her left eye. She hadn't expected me to be this direct. Daniel was emotional, she said, shifting the blame smoothly. You know how overwhelmed he gets. He thought you'd be relieved. That we were handling things. I smiled faintly. I raised Daniel. I know exactly how he gets. And I know who handles him when he's overwhelmed. She stiffened. That's not fair. Neither is trying to sell someone's home behind their back. There was a pause. The air in the room had thickened. I spoke to Eleanor, she said suddenly. Briefly. Of course she did. She said the listing is active, that showings begin next week. Correct. You'll ruin us. I shrugged, just balancing the scales. She stood abruptly. You think this is noble? That you're teaching us a lesson? This is vindictive, Loretta. I stood too. Not fast. Not with drama. Just steadily. What's vindictive is whispering about getting rid of the old house before I even landed. What's vindictive is pretending I'm a burden when I've been your silent investor for a decade. Her jaw clenched. I gave you land, I said, voice low but firm. I paid your debts. I covered your tuition when your father cut you off. I sent you grocery money when you said your fridge was empty. I even paid for your fertility tests and never once asked if you used them. And what did you give me back? An empty mailbox and a forged signature. Cynthia said nothing, but I could see her lip tremble slightly. Just for a second. It vanished as quickly as it came. You don't get to claim the moral high ground, I said. You're just upset because for once, I wrote the check in reverse. Silence. Then, you'll lose Daniel, she said, quieter now. He'll never forgive this. I looked her in the eye. Then he'll have to learn what forgiveness really means. She turned without another word, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. But before she opened it, she hesitated. You know, she said over her shoulder, you always pretended to be helpless, this whole quiet old lady with a garden thing, but you're not helpless. You're dangerous. I almost smiled. Then she left. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the silence settle like dust. Dangerous. Not a word anyone had ever used for me before. I walked to the kitchen, brewed myself a strong cup of tea, and took it out to the porch. The wind had picked up. The leaves were turning. Wilmington autumns always came early, like they were in a hurry to cover up what summer left behind. I sat down on the old wooden chair Robert built and watched the street. My house, my porch, my life. Still here, still mine. The first showing of their house was on a Thursday morning. Eleanor had asked if I wanted to be there. I said no, not out of kindness, but because I didn't need to be. I already knew what was inside. Instead, I baked muffins. Blueberry, like Robert used to love, even though I hardly ate sweets these days. I just liked the smell. It made the house feel like mine again, like something real, not a name on a file someone else was trying to erase. At 11 a.m., Eleanor called. Buyers loved the space, she said. Didn't love the debt. Figures. But I've got a cash couple coming Saturday, retired lawyers. They're looking for something just like this. Big enough for their grandkids, shallow enough for a bargain. And Daniel's house, well, let's just say it photographs better than it lives. I chuckled. Sounds familiar. We hung up. I returned to the kitchen, wiped down the counters again, more out of habit than need. And then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. Not Daniel, not Cynthia. It was Emily, my granddaughter. 17, all limbs and nerves, with her dad's eyes in my chin. She wore a college sweatshirt too big for her and held a brown paper bag awkwardly, like it might explode. I opened the door. "Hi, Grandma." "Hi, baby." We stood there for a second. Then she stepped forward and hugged me. Tight, without words. She smelled like shampoo and library books. I hadn't realized how much I needed that hug until it happened. "I brought muffins," she said, holding up the bag. "But now I smell yours and I feel dumb." I laughed. "Muffins are muffins. Come in." We sat in the living room, and for a while we just ate. Hers were chocolate chip. Store-bought. Still warm from the sun through the bag. We didn't talk much at first. That was something about Emily. She didn't fill silence just to fill it. "Dad's freaking out," she said eventually, without looking up. I figured. "He's been pacing for days, talking to lawyers. Mom won't stop yelling. She thinks you're trying to humiliate them." I sipped my tea. "Is that what you think?" She shook her head immediately. "No. I think you're finally standing up for yourself. I think it's about time." I looked at her. Really looked. There was something in her face that reminded me of myself at 17. That same blend of watchfulness and fire. The instinct to make herself small and the growing refusal to keep doing it. "They said you were confused," she added. "That maybe you were forgetting things." "Did they?" I told them that if anyone in this family forgets things, it's the ones who never remember birthdays. That made me laugh. She leaned back on the couch, tucking her feet under her. "Why didn't you tell me? You're still a child. I'm old enough to see what's going on." That stopped me, because she was right. "You always call," she said. "You always remember when I have exams. You sent me a sweater last winter even though I forgot to say I was cold. You even signed up for that library app to send me books. I like those books." "I know," she smiled. "And I like you. Just you. Not your money, not your house. Just you." I felt something in my chest twist and soften at once. "You don't have to fight alone, Grandma." I reached over, took her hand. "Thank you," I said. She held on tight. "What are you going to do next?" "Depends." "On what?" "On whether your parents learn what the word consequences means." She nodded solemnly. Then, like a teenager again, she asked, "Can I have another muffin?" "Take 3. We spent the afternoon together, just sitting. No plans, no drama, just two women, one at the start of things, one at the edge, sharing quiet like it was something sacred. When she left, I walked her to the porch. "Do you need a ride?" I asked. "I'm okay. I biked. I told Mom I was going to the library." "Well, don't lie too well. It runs in the family." She grinned, hugged me again, and pedaled off into the late-day sun. I watched her go until she turned the corner. Then I walked back inside, locked the door, and stood in the center of my house. Still mine, still standing, still full of muffins. The letter came the next morning, tucked in among grocery ads and a coupon for dog grooming. Thick cream paper, gold embossing, expensive like guilt money. From the desk of Jonathan R. Keene, attorney at law. I didn't need to open it to know what it said. Still, I did. It was polite, of course. Lawyers like their knives sheathed in velvet. "Dear Mrs. Winslow," it began, "it has come to our attention that you have initiated legal actions which may directly impact the financial stability of Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Winslow. We urge you to reconsider this course and engage in mediated discussion before further harm is done to the familial structure and estate. I stopped reading. The familial structure. As if it were drywall. As if it hadn't already been cracked wide open the minute they decided I was easier to manage than to respect. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my checkbook. A relic beside a relic. The phone rang 2 hours later. Eleanor. "They've started calling agents," she said, dry amusement in her voice. "Trying to pull the listing." "Can they?" "Nope." "You initiated through the ownership clause in the land transfer. It's airtight. Took some digging, but you had foresight, Loretta. Or maybe just instincts." "I had Robert," I said softly. We ended the call, and I sat by the window for a long time, watching the street. It had rained in the night. The pavement shimmered, and the air smelled like damp leaves and memory. Then I heard the car. Not Daniel's. A different engine. Heavier. A black SUV pulled into my driveway, and out stepped Cynthia's father. A man I hadn't seen since the wedding. Smug, polished, perpetually on Bluetooth. He used to call me ma'am, like it tasted bad in his mouth. He rang the bell and waited exactly 10 seconds before knocking, sharp, rapid, entitled. I opened the door and leaned against the frame. "Well, this is unexpected." He smiled, all teeth and self-importance. "Loretta, may I come in?" "No." His smile flickered. "I'd prefer to speak in private." "I prefer honesty," I said. "So we're both out of luck." He cleared his throat, smoothed his lapel. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to offer a solution." Is that what they're calling threats now? Let's not be dramatic. Let's not be dishonest. We stood there, two people decades apart, but equally stubborn. "I understand emotions are high," he said, tone changing, becoming softer. "Families are messy, but you're not helping anyone by escalating things." I tilted my head. "And what do you suggest? That I donate my home in exchange for peace?" He chuckled, as if I were cute. "You've had a good life, Loretta. More years behind than ahead. Why not use this time to ensure the next generation is secure?" "That's what I thought I was doing," I said, "until your daughter and my son decided to secure themselves with a pen behind my back." He sighed. "You're making this ugly." I stepped forward, just enough to make him blink. "No, I'm making it fair." He blinked again. "Tell Cynthia I don't take bribes from men who think age equals weakness," I said. "Tell Daniel I'm not the ghost he hoped would fade. Tell your lawyer I still have the original deed, the one with the clause Robert insisted on keeping." His jaw tightened. "And tell yourself," I added, "that if you ever step onto my porch again without respect, I'll show you what real escalation looks like." He didn't respond, just turned, muttered something into his phone, and walked back to the SUV. He didn't look back. I closed the door slowly and leaned against it, not shaking, not triumphant, just steady. Later, I poured myself a glass of lemonade and sat on the porch. The clouds had cleared. The sun was just warm enough to touch, not burn. I watched a squirrel dig in the flower bed I'd let go wild this year. Let it dig. Let it take what it needed. But not everything. Not everything. Daniel called that night. I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted, "We need to talk." 3 minutes later, in person. 5 after that. Now. I didn't answer. Let him sweat. Let him sit in that silence I'd swallowed for years. At 9:17 p.m., I heard his car in the driveway. Not the slow, soft kind of arrival meant to soothe. No. Headlights sharp, tires crunching gravel like a threat. I didn't open the door until the third knock. He stood there, looking worn, not angry, not smug, just exhausted. For once, he didn't come in uninvited. "May I?" he asked. I nodded. He walked in slowly, like the house was unfamiliar. Maybe it was. Maybe he'd forgotten what it smelled like. Lemon oil and old wood and the faint perfume of time. We sat in the living room. I didn't offer tea. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and stared at his hands. I know I messed up. I didn't speak. I got ahead of myself. With the papers. With the idea. We thought. No, I said quietly. You thought. Cynthia planned. I was an obstacle. He flinched. I just wanted to make things easier, he said. For everyone. No. You wanted to control what you thought was already yours. He looked up. Is that what you think of me? I think, I said slowly, that you don't see me anymore. Not as a person. Just as a set of assets, liabilities, risks. He sat back. That's not true. Isn't it? I asked. Tell me the last time you called without needing something. He opened his mouth, closed it. Tell me my birthday. He blinked. What? You heard me. He swallowed. January 8th? Wrong. Robert's was January 8th. Mine is March 3rd. He looked down. I let the silence do what words never could. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said. I'm doing this because I finally saw you clearly, and because I remembered who I am. He rubbed his face. The house is going to sell. Yes. We can't afford to buy it back. I know. His voice dropped. We have nowhere else to go. I didn't reply right away. Just watched him. Finally. You should have thought about that before trying to sell the roof over my head while I was still under it. He was quiet a long time. Then, what do you want me to do? I stood, walked to the mantel, picked up the picture of him as a boy, his hand in Robert's, his smile wide, missing a front tooth. Apologize, I said. Really. Not for the sale, not for the paperwork. For forgetting who raised you. For pretending I didn't matter unless I was writing checks. He looked up, eyes rimmed red. I'm sorry. I waited. He stood, walked over. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything, for not seeing you, for choosing convenience over respect. I nodded. That was something. Not everything, but something. He reached for my hand. I let him. I don't know what happens now, he said. Neither do I replied. But it won't be what you expected. And it won't be what Cynthia planned. He nodded once. I walked him to the door. As he stepped onto the porch, he paused. You were never weak, were you? No, I said. I was just tired. He looked like he might say more, but he didn't. He got in his car and drove away, slower this time, like he was thinking, not reacting. I closed the door, turned off the porch light, and exhaled. The sale closed on a Monday. Eleanor called me just after lunch, her voice cool and clean, the way a good scalpel should sound. It's done, she said. Wire transfers processing. Buyer paid cash, full amount. We got market value, not a cent less. I didn't smile. Not out of coldness, just because some victories don't feel like cheers. They feel like deep, steady breathing after you've been holding it for years. What's next? I asked. I'll file the deed record today. Daniel and Cynthia will get their notification by Thursday. Good, I said. Let them read it in silence. I hung up and walked into the kitchen. It was strange how still everything felt. Not empty, still. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when the power flickers back on and you hear your own heartbeat again. I pulled the muffins from the freezer, the last batch Emily and I had made, and set them out to thaw. It felt like the right thing to do. I didn't call Daniel, didn't call Cynthia, didn't need to. They'd hear soon enough. Instead, I called Janice, my lawyer. "Time to update the documents," I said. "Will trust the whole map." "Ready when you are," she said. "You want to add a beneficiary?" "Yes." "Name?" "Emily Rose Winslow." There was a pause, then a smile in her voice. "Your granddaughter?" "She's the only one who still sees me." "Understood. We'll begin drafting today." I hung up and looked around the house again. Not out of nostalgia, out of clarity. The walls were still mine. The floors still held my weight. And my legacy would go to someone who'd never asked for a penny, only a place at my table. That afternoon, I sat on the porch with my tea, watching the wind tug at the edges of the world. The trees were beginning to shift, early hints of fall rustling in the green. Change never comes loudly. It comes like that. A leaf here, a silence there. At 4:42 p.m., I saw Cynthia's car speed past my house. She didn't stop, didn't even slow down. But even at that distance, I recognized the way she gripped the wheel, tight, desperate, like someone holding on to the last thread of a story they'd written too confidently. By 6:15, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail again. A minute later, a message came through. "The house sold?" Then, "You really did it." And finally, "Where are we supposed to go?" I stared at the screen, typed slowly, "Wherever you earn." I didn't press send. Not yet. Instead, I deleted the draft. Not out of mercy. Just because I didn't need to say anything. He already knew. That night, I made myself a full dinner for the first time in months. Real vegetables, a small roast. Set the table with a placemat and everything. No one to impress. Just me. And that was enough. I thought they might show up the next day, storming the porch, full of loud apologies or louder demands. But they didn't. Instead, silence. And in that silence, I made arrangements. The next morning, I met Janice at her office, a little brick building with old blinds and a receptionist who called me Ms. Winslow, like I was someone important. I suppose in that moment, I was. We sat across from each other in her quiet little conference room. She wore the same square glasses she'd worn when Robert and I came in to write our first will. Back then, everything was still joint. Everything still felt shared. Now, it was just me. But I didn't feel small. "I've drafted the updated trust," she said, sliding the papers forward. "We'll protect the funds under Emily's name, restrict access until she's 25. Education and housing expenses allowed, but only with your pre-approval unless you're incapacitated." "She won't take advantage," I said. "Even so," Janice replied gently, "we put safeguards in place. Not because we doubt her, but because we trust your judgment." I read each page, slowly, carefully. No more blind signatures. No more letting things slide because someone called me Mom. When I got to the new will, I paused. "Everything to Emily?" Janice asked. "Yes, the house. What's left in savings, and—" I hesitated, then nodded. "Add the cabin in the mountains. The one Robert never finished. It's still in my name." "She'll inherit it all?" "No," I said. "She'll earn it all." Janice made a note. "And Daniel?" "Nothing." "Are you sure?" I thought of forged signatures. of whispered plots behind vending machines, of phone calls only made when a check was needed. I'm sure. We signed, witnessed, stamped, and when I walked out of that office, I felt something lift off my shoulders. Not pain, not grief, just old weight I didn't need anymore. On the way home, I stopped by the market and bought tulips. Orange ones. Emily's favorite. I didn't need a reason. I just felt like giving her something that had no strings. When I got home, the answering machine light was blinking. 2 new messages, both from Cynthia. The first was calm. Loretta, this has gone too far. We need to talk. You've made your point, but this is our life. Please call me. The second wasn't. You had no right. That land was a gift. That house was our future. Do you know what you've done? I deleted both. Then I unplugged the machine. If they wanted to speak, they could do it with a stamp and a letter, like people used to, like people who understood what effort actually meant. That evening, Emily stopped by. She didn't say anything at first, just set her backpack down and sat across from me at the kitchen table, the way she used to when she was little and wanted me to paint her nails. You okay? She asked finally. I'm fine. They're not. I know. She fidgeted with her sleeve. Dad said you won't let him near the house anymore. He said that? She nodded. Said you've locked him out of everything. I took a breath. Sweetheart, I said gently, your father made a choice, and now he's dealing with the results. I get that, she said quickly. I'm not saying you're wrong. I looked at her closely. Her eyes were steady. I don't know how to be in the middle. You're not, I said. You never were. You're the only one who stood beside me. She blinked hard. Then she nodded. Good, I said. Because I've made another change. I slid the folder across the table. She opened it. Read. Her eyes widened. Grandma, it's not a gift, I said. It's a vote of confidence. She looked back at me, stunned. But this is everything. I smiled. No, this is just the beginning. They finally came together 2 days later, unannounced. Of course. It was just past 10 in the morning. I was in the garden, pruning the roses that had bloomed too early. September always fooled them into thinking they had one last chance. I understood that kind of mistake. When I heard the car door slam, I didn't look up. Cynthia's voice reached me first. She's outside. Then Daniel. Just let me talk. I snipped a stem. Calm. Focused. They approached like people walking into a courtroom. Self-conscious, angry, already losing. Mom, Daniel said, can we talk? I wiped my hands on my apron, turned, and faced them both. Cynthia had sunglasses on, though the sun was behind the house. Daniel looked like he hadn't slept, not tragic, not broken, just uncomfortable. The face of a man forced to realize he doesn't hold the pen anymore. You're here, I said. What a surprise. Cynthia shifted. We figured it was time. Time for what? She took off the sunglasses. A real conversation. No lawyers, no emails, just us. I folded my hands. All right. Talk. Daniel stepped forward, nervous. The house is gone. I know. We don't have a plan. Not my problem. Cynthia's mouth opened, closed. She hadn't expected that. Daniel swallowed. I made a mistake. You made a series of choices, I corrected. All of them selfish, all of them silent. I thought. He hesitated. I thought you wouldn't notice. That's the worst part, I said softly. That you counted on me being too quiet, too trusting, too tired to fight back. He looked at the ground. Cynthia finally spoke. You've made your point. You've embarrassed us. You've punished us. I cut her off. Stop. Just stop. She blinked. This isn't about embarrassment or punishment. It's about dignity. Mine. The kind you both trampled like it was an old doormat. Daniel's voice cracked a little. We didn't mean to. You meant to erase me, I said. Not out of hatred, but convenience. Silence. A long one. Finally, Daniel looked up. What do you want? Nothing, I said. And that's exactly what you're getting. Cynthia stiffened. You can't just cut us off. I can, I said. And I have. The documents are signed. The accounts changed. The trust is closed and reopened in Emily's name. Daniel's mouth opened. You gave everything to her? Yes. But she's a child. She's more grown than either of you. He looked stunned. Cynthia's eyes were wet now, but not with remorse. Just shock. You told me, I said, looking at Cynthia, that I was dangerous. You were right. Not because I'm vindictive, but because I remember things. I remember who helped and who hid, who showed up and who just sent bills. They stood there like two people on the other side of glass, banging, begging to be let into a house they never bothered to truly enter. I'm not angry anymore, I said. Daniel looked up, hopeful. I'm done. He blinked. I stepped forward, just one step. You'll land on your feet. You always do. You've got 2 degrees, 3 cars, and a wife who could sell ice to a glacier. You'll be fine. But you're... He caught himself. You're really cutting ties? No, I'm cutting expectations. And then, like Robert used to, I offered the one grace I had left. You're still my son. That won't change. But don't confuse biology with belonging. I turned back to my roses. Cynthia started to speak. Daniel touched her arm. Don't, he said. They left. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt whole. The papers were final. The funds had cleared. The house was no longer theirs. The land was back in my name, and the deed, rewritten, refiled, sat in my fireproof box under a folder labeled Winslow Corrected. Janice called just after lunch. All tied up, she said. Nothing left hanging. You're legally free. I thanked her, but I already knew. I'd felt it that morning when I woke up and didn't reach for my phone out of habit. Didn't expect a call, didn't brace for a message. Just opened the curtains, made my tea, and stood in the light of my own windows. Free. It doesn't feel like a parade. It feels like breathing without waiting for permission. I spent the afternoon writing letters. Not to Daniel, not to Cynthia, to Emily. 3 of them, in fact. The first, instructions. A map of what she now held. Not just the assets, but the obligations. The land tax schedule. The names of the neighbors. Where I kept the spare keys. What not to let the upstairs bathroom do in winter. The second, memories. Not grand ones. Little ones. The kind that no one photographs. The way her grandfather's boots sounded on the porch in February. The secret to making pie crust without a recipe. The story of the storm in '82 that cracked the old oak and how we saved it with rope and faith. And the third? Just love. Simple. Quiet. No apologies. No lessons. Just words that said, I see you. I trust you. I know who you are. I sealed all 3. Labeled them in pen. Now, later, when I'm gone. Then I walked to the mailbox and dropped them in, even though she lived just 3 blocks away. Some things are better when they arrive unexpectedly. Back inside, I folded laundry. The simple rhythm of it soothed me. Towel, shirt, sheet. The house quiet, warm, clean. No movement in the driveway. No tension behind the windows. When the phone rang just before dinner, I almost didn't answer. But I did. It was Daniel. His voice was smaller this time. "Hi, Ma." Daniel. I wanted to say, "Thank you." I said nothing. For not humiliating us publicly, for not pressing charges, for not making it worse than it already is. Still, I said nothing. And, he added, for doing what you thought was right. Now I spoke. What I knew was right. He sighed. "I guess we deserve all of it." "You do." A long pause. "I saw Emily yesterday," he said. "I know. She told me about the trust." I waited. "She's proud of you." "She should be," I said. Another pause. "She's also kind. She doesn't want us to suffer." "She's young," I said. "That kindness comes easy when you haven't yet been taught to guard it." Daniel was quiet again. Then, "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am." I heard something genuine this time. Not desperation, not bargaining, just something almost honest. "I believe you," I said. "Will you ever forgive me?" "I already did," I said. "The day I chose to save myself instead of fix you." He choked out a small laugh, or maybe a sob. "Take care of yourself," I added. "You too." And then we hung up. No fanfare. Just quiet. After dinner, I sat in the living room and watched the light fade. It went slowly, as it always does in September, lingering like it didn't want to leave. I didn't turn on the lamps. Let the dusk settle in like an old friend. Somewhere in the kitchen, the clock ticked. Somewhere across town, a house no longer mine was empty. And here, right here, everything still stood, mine and still. I didn't see Emily for a few days after that. I didn't expect to. She had classes starting, applications to finish, and a quiet grace that never felt the need to fill silence with performance. But on Sunday morning, she knocked. No warning. Just her in a paper bag and that open face that never tried to hide its heart. "I brought bread," she said. I smiled. "Did you bake it?" "No, but I watched someone else do it very impressively." We sat in the kitchen. She sliced. I poured tea. We passed butter like it was ceremony. "I got the letters," she said after a while. "I hoped you would." I cried through the second one. "I hoped you wouldn't." She smiled. "You remember everything." "I remember what matters." We sat in silence for a moment, chewing. The clock ticked. A car passed slowly outside, gravel under tires. Somewhere, a bird sang a lazy Sunday song. Then she asked, "Do you ever regret it?" I didn't need to ask what she meant. "No," I said, "not even once." "But it's your son." "Yes. And I'm still his mother. But motherhood doesn't mean martyrdom." She looked down. "I always thought," she said softly, "that love meant giving everything." "It can," I said. "But giving isn't the same as surrendering." She nodded slowly. "I just don't want to end up like them." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you ask that question." We sipped quietly for a while. She looked at the walls, still painted the same warm beige Robert picked when we first moved in. Looked at the photos on the mantel, at the quilt on the couch, at the humming of the house around her. "It feels different in here," she said. "It is. Quieter. It's the sound of no one expecting you to give yourself away." She set down her mug. "I think I want to study elder law." That surprised me. I've been reading, she went on, about inheritance abuse, medical coercion, how easy it is for families to take everything from someone just because they're slower now or alone. I said nothing, just watched her. I want to make sure people like you don't have to burn down a house just to be heard. My throat tightened. I took her hand across the table. You'll be good at it, I said. I'll be better, she said. Because of you. The sun shifted through the blinds, striping her face in lines of gold and shadow. She looked older, not in years, in presence. Before she left, she packed up the rest of the bread and slipped a note into the tin where I used to keep stamps. I waited until the house was quiet again before I opened it. Grandma, you didn't just teach me how to stand up. You reminded me why we do it. Love, E. I folded the note and placed it under the lid. Not everything needed to be framed. Some things just needed to be held. A month passed. The leaves turned without asking permission. The air began to smell like endings. Wood smoke, old apples, the kind of chill that makes you reach for a sweater before you realize you're cold. I liked it. Some things arrive slowly. Peace is one of them. The house stayed quiet. Daniel didn't call again. Cynthia sent one short email through her lawyer. A formal acknowledgement of the sale. Regretfully accepted. I signed nothing. Replied to nothing. There was nothing left to explain. I spent my mornings walking. Not far. Just around the neighborhood. People noticed me more now. The ones who used to wave vaguely now stopped to talk. A woman down the street brought me a pumpkin pie she'd made too much of. A man trimming his hedges offered to fix the loose shutter on my porch. I let him. No one asked about the house I'd sold, but I saw it in their eyes. They knew. That's the thing about quiet victories. They echo, even when no one speaks. One afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with my old photo albums spread out. Not to dwell, just to remember. Robert, sunburned and laughing beside a car that barely ran. Daniel at 4, covered in chocolate. Emily at 7, wearing my high heels and holding a plunger like a scepter. So much life. So much good. I didn't want to erase any of it. I just refused to let the ending sour the beginning. The phone rang. The landline. Emily. Are you home? Always. I'm coming by. She didn't knock when she arrived. Just let herself in, the way Robert used to. Like this house was an extension of her breath. I brought something, she said, holding up a folder. Inside, her college acceptance letter. Scholarship. Full ride. Law program. I felt the pride rise so fast I had to swallow twice before speaking. You did it, she grinned. We did. No, I said, touching her cheek. This one's yours. She sat across from me and pulled out her laptop. There's a form I want you to look at. It's for naming someone in my financial documents. You know, just in case. You want to name me? I want to name the woman who taught me what not to give away. We filled it out together. Later, we sat in the living room as the sun lowered itself behind the trees, slowly, like it didn't want to miss anything. She turned to me. Do you think they'll ever really get it? Dad and Cynthia? I thought for a long time. I don't know, I said. But that's not mine to carry. She nodded. You carried enough. We didn't talk after that. Just sat. She rested her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was small, and I let my hand rest on hers like it still needed my warmth. Outside, the world went on. But in here, in this little house with the quiet walls and the stitched-up history, Everything was finally where it belonged. I woke up early on my birthday, March 3rd, the date Daniel forgot, the date Robert never did. There was no party, no balloons or streamers, just sun through the curtains and the quiet rhythm of the heater kicking on. I boiled water, 2 tea bags, no sugar. Same old mug with the chip in the rim, the one Emily tried to replace once, not knowing some things shouldn't be made new. At 7:30, the doorbell rang. I didn't hurry. Good things wait. It was Emily, of course. She held a single wrapped package about the size of a loaf of bread, and a card with handwriting I recognized immediately. Her own, round and careful. She still wrote like she thought every word might be framed. "Happy birthday," she said. "You remembered. I always will." We sat at the kitchen table. She watched me unwrap the package. Inside, a wooden frame, handmade. Simple, sturdy. And within it, the letter I'd written her, the third one, "When I'm gone." "I know it's early," she said, "but I wanted it where I could see it. While you're still here." I touched the glass, tracing the words like they belonged to someone else. But they didn't. They were mine. And now, hers. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I know." But we both understood what she meant. We hung the frame in the hallway, the space between the kitchen and the living room, the in-between, where life happens. She left just after lunch, promising to return for dinner. I told her to bring nothing. She wouldn't listen, of course. Alone again, I stood by the window. Outside, the neighbor's kid was learning to ride a bike. His mother ran alongside him, hand out, ready to catch, even though he didn't need it anymore. I smiled. We all keep hands out longer than we should sometimes. The mailbox flag was up. Inside, 2 envelopes. One from the county clerk. Final confirmation that the house had transferred fully, that no appeals had been filed, no contests made. Done. The second from Daniel. Handwritten. Just 1 line. "You were right to stop us. I'm trying to be someone she wouldn't be ashamed of." No name, no ask. Just that. I put it in the drawer with the others. I didn't need more. That evening, Emily returned with soup and pie and a small bouquet of wildflowers. She set the table while I lit candles. No guests. No speeches, just 2 women, one becoming, one remembering. Over dessert, she looked at me and asked, "Are you happy?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of Robert, of the garden, of the silence in the house that now felt chosen, not forced, of the photo albums, the folded letters, the deed in my name, and the strength in my spine. "I'm at peace," I said. "Which is better?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "I want people to know your story," she said. "What you did." "They won't believe it," I said. "Then they need to hear it. So maybe you're hearing it now. Maybe you're sitting with tea of your own, or tired from holding up people who forgot what your hands are for. Maybe you've stayed silent too long. Maybe someone told you that being quiet was the same as being kind. It's not. Kindness has a spine, and mine is still standing. If this story found something in you, something hidden or waiting or just beginning, let it live. Share it. Tell it. Pass it on. Someone out there needs to know it's never too late to take back what's yours. If you're touched by the story, share it with someone who needs a reminder. You don't have to be silent.